Hi guys, welcome to Keep Arkansas Fishing. We have a couple of guests tonight from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, Jeff Buckingham and Sean Lusk, and we're going to talk about some vegetation in Degray Lake and maybe some summer fish care topics in a little while. So one of y'all want to start and tell them what y'all do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Sean Lusk. I'm the staff biologist in the fisheries division with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And so I deal with a lot of the regulation side of things, fishery management plans, lake management plans, a lot of the budgeting, and a lot of just random catch-all stuff. I used to be a district biologist out of the Hot Springs office, so I dealt with a lot of the Degray aquatic vegetation stuff, and since over the past several months, I've passed that baton off to the biologists that are out of that office now.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Buckingham. I'm the Black Bass Program Biologist. I'm also out of the Hot Springs office, so I was working pretty closely with Sean up till he took his new position. It's a statewide gig with the Black Bass Program, so we are doing black bass management statewide, and that's not only black bass management on our reservoirs, but also our streams and our stream smallmouth bass. So we do a good mix of stuff, work really closely with our district biologists to manage the bass fisheries and do research. So pretty fun gig. Get to see a lot of different water and a lot of different bass that we have in the state.
Well, we're going to talk a little about what vegetation that is actually planted in Degray Lake, and they've got 3 or 4 varieties, and I'll let y'all tell them about what we've got, what we expect, and where we're headed.
Okay, so as a little bit of background, back when the lakes were first constructed, shortly after they came online, there was a lot of native aquatic vegetation that were growing in both Lakes Ouachita and Degray. And around 2009, 2010, a lot of that vegetation, and seemingly all of it, disappeared, okay? And towards the end of when there was vegetation in these reservoirs, it was a mix of both native aquatic vegetation and non-native. And so from the fishing standpoint, it was great. I don't think I can understate the value that aquatic vegetation provides to not only fisheries but wildlife. It also, most anglers love it because it really stages the fish. It provides great nursery cover. Just all around, it's hard to underscore the value that aquatic vegetation brings. Now, if you don't care about fishing or fish, you're generally not a huge fan of aquatic vegetation. So towards the 2003-04 range, there started to be a lot of what we refer to as user group conflicts. So our anglers were really happy with the aquatic vegetation, but a lot of the people that were just coming to Ouachita and Degray, they didn't really care about this veg, okay? They didn't want their kids out there swimming and having the green sea monster grabbing their ankles and whatnot. So they started complaining to the Corps of Engineers, and so the Corps of Engineers started to explore ways of getting rid of aquatic vegetation. And what they were using was what are called the pack flies. Now, pack flies use hydrilla, one of the non-natives that was in the lake, as a host species. And basically what they do is these pack flies will lay their eggs in the leaves of the hydrilla. And then as those eggs hatch and you get the larvae that are coming out, they will burrow into the stem of the hydrilla and basically eat a little circle around, okay? And then after that life stage, they'll swim up to the surface, and pack flies are like the size of a fruit fly. They're tiny. And they just hop around on the surface, and then that adult will go and lay eggs, and the whole process continues. Now, they won't actually kill that stem of hydrilla, which wouldn't make sense, right? If you need a certain section of plant as part of your life history, you don't want to kill the host. That's the worst possible thing that you can do. So why the Corps of Engineers were experimenting with these Pakistani flies, the Game and Fish Commission was doing some herbicide applications around major boat docks, in some areas where there was a lot of use, trying to mitigate this user group conflict. Now, while all of that was going on, both Ouachita and Degray were experiencing near record lake levels. There was consecutive years of near record highs followed by years of near record lows. And so why that's significant is when you have these high water levels, anything that's below a certain level is going to die, right?
Yep, no sunlight.
Yeah, you don't have plants growing in 30, 40 foot of water. And so if you have really high water and then you throw a bunch of turbidity on there, a bunch of sediment coming in from our tributaries, you're not getting that light penetration. So the only vegetation that's living is this little band that's close to the surface. But then when the lake drops out, all of that little band, it's way up there on the bank. And so the reason why the vegetation took the downturn way back in 2009, 2010 was a result of a multitude of different factors. Now, around 2015, 2016, the vegetation started to rebound on Washita, but it was taking a lot longer on Degray. And so that's when we initiated this project to try to get aquatic vegetation reestablished on Degray. And so we brought in the Corps of Engineers, we brought in specialists with the Corps' Engineering Research and Development Center. And basically what they did is they looked at the historical plant community that was growing on Degray, and they essentially gave us a roadmap on a game plan that we could follow to try to get native aquatic vegetation reestablished. And so the 4 plant species they had us focus on were coontail, eelgrass, American pondweed, and sago pondweed. And so those are the 4 species that we're focused on right now.
Well, I know all the fishermen that I'm talking to, and last time I've been there was in March, and I was just astounded when I seen how much grass was there in March. And my friends are telling me now that you won't even know you're on the same lake again. Now I said, it looks like it did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's what I like to hear, and I know that's what the fish are gonna like too. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we like to hear. You know, we've, over the past, since 2019, we have put a significant amount of effort. You know, we've tapped into the Black Bass Program. I mean, Jeff's been there every step of the way, and we have put in a significant amount of time, effort, and resources into getting that aquatic vegetation. Now, there's no way that we can point to the vegetation that's out there and say that is 100% because of us, right? You know,
right.
There was so many years of aquatic vegetation out there. There is a natural seed bank. You know, if you were to go out to your yard and, you know, rip a bunch of grass out, the grass is going to grow back because you have a seed bank. Well, it's the same thing with the lake out here. So it's trying to rebound. And so we were just hoping that we could add a little kindling to the fire to get it to really start firing and coming back.
Yeah, I know in March when I was out there's lots of, because I had been out with y'all planting it and seen what was going on and give me a little bit of an idea, but I do know I fished a lot of stuff in March that was just voluntary. It wasn't anything that anybody had anything to do with.
Yeah.
It just naturally came back, because be a spot here and a spot there, and
yeah, it's cool that that's the way aquatic vegetation generally spreads. So, you know, we have these floating enclosures, and you can think of those floating enclosures as little pepper shakers, right? Throughout the year, with lake level, you know, with wave action and wind action, they're dropping a bunch of reproductive structures in that little area. But they reproduce in multiple different ways, and one of them is through just vegetative structures. So when we put out those coontail enclosures, there are little pieces of coontail that are just floating in every single direction. As that wind changes, there's sprigs going out, and you never really know where the vegetation, where the conditions are going to come together to really get vegetation established. So it's cool that we're putting these up, and it may float all the way to the far side of the lake, and conditions could just come together, and you could have something sprout right there.
I was actually, that first couple of years, I was a little bit skeptical and knew that Mother Nature had to play a big part.
Oh, yeah.
And the Corps of Engineers had to play a big part in controlling water levels for it to work, and it has. Everything has kind of worked together. We haven't had any floods, hadn't really had a drought till maybe this year now, I don't know, but they're keeping the water pretty good. I think it's 1.5 foot from normal right now, so that's, if this heat don't make them drain it completely, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, we are absolutely, to a degree, at the mercy of Mother Nature. Because when you think about what these lakes are designed for, you know, they're designed for flood control, hydroelectric power generation. That is what they're there for. And you know, fisheries and recreation, that falls a little bit lower on the list. So when we have a really hot summer and we're not getting these inflows, they have to use that water for hydroelectric power generation. We've got the AC running right now, and that power is coming from, these dams. And so ideally, if we had it our way, we would just keep that lake just absolutely right where it would be managed very similar to a Lake Hamilton or Lake Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the purpose of the reservoir, so we kind of have to work with the cards that were dealt.
Well, I just know it's doing good, and all the fishermen I know are pretty tickled, and a few of them do. They've got concerns about, oh, what's this mess right here? And I go, well, as far as I know, that's some of the volunteer stuff that just came along on its own, and nothing we can do about it till hopefully something takes it over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and if there are a lot of species of aquatic vegetation that are actually out in the lake right now. Unfortunately, they're not all the species that we've tried to plant. We've got some of them that we think are going to do a lot better than other ones, but a lot of the really globby stuff that it almost looks like cotton candy. I know if you've ever been fishing, you've had some of this stuff wrapped around your hook, and a lot of that is just naturally occurring. If we had it our way, we wouldn't put any of that in any of our lakes, and around this time of year, we get a tremendous amount of phone calls, mainly from people that have private ponds that have a lot of nutrients flowing in there, and they will get just a carpet of what it's called filamentous algae, and they'll get a carpet of it growing all over the bottom, and that's not something that we've brought into the lake. That's something that's just naturally occurring. It's just naturally there.
And it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
You're not gonna get away from it anywhere. It's everywhere in the state.
Yeah, even if you go to surrounding states and across the country, you are going to find filamentous algae. It is just all over the place.
But as long as you've got good grass, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
'Cause you ain't fishing where that's at.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Yeah.
And I'm hoping that in the next few years that this grass, it stays consistent, it's consistently growing, because the bass that are in the lake, a lot of them, the bigger ones right now, they haven't grown up living in that grass yet, so they're still getting used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we can keep it going here for the next couple of years, those 4 or 5 plus pounders are gonna get used to living in that grass, and you'll be really able to catch them.
I have a lot of us have talked about that. Was that gonna be a situation where these 2, 3, 4, 5 pounders that's come up without any grass, are they gonna have to theoretically learn all over about where they're gonna start?
Yeah,
To a certain degree, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And right now, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, they've been doing a big 4-year study on Degray, looking at the interaction between black bass and hybrids. And one of the aspects of that study was actually putting telemetry tags in largemouth and hybrids. Okay, so what a telemetry tag is it allows us to track exactly where that fish is. So we can see during certain times of year what habitat is it using. Okay, and they're kind of getting really close to finishing up this study. But one of the interesting aspects was during certain times of year, they're finding that the largemouth are actually spending a lot of their time offshore. They're just kind of out there cruising around in the pelagic zone, so they're not necessarily tucked up against the bank. And one of the big questions is, would we have made that same observation if there was a lot of aquatic vegetation out there? If there was that vegetation, would they stay more on the onshore habitats, the littoral areas, or would they still continue to go to those offshore areas? And that's something that we don't have an answer to.
And it's out there, it's on YouTube. I've seen, think they done 6 videos on it that I've watched, but Texas Parks have done it on Toledo Bend, and they end up, they lost some fish in the beginning right off the bat, but after the fact, I know one particular fish, that thing has been all over the place, over the lake. Mm-hmm. It'll go in the summer, it goes out to the main lake, and then it amazed me when they had first tagged it, or whatever you call it, they had found it in the back of a creek, and they got it, and a year later, when it came down to spawn, it came right back to the same place. So that's pretty cool.
That's very cool. And you saw something like that with your master's project.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't doing telemetry, but I was tagging fish for an exploitation study, and you would throw fish in a tag them in one spot, and then, some of those fish were, back there a year later, and you come back and to tag more fish, and you're picking up that fish in the same spot as it was the year before.
Yeah.
What a lot of these telemetry studies kind of tell us is they're kind of like humans. I mean, they're a lot of individualistic. Some will do one thing, some will do another thing. They just don't all do the same thing as much as we think that, hey, it's, summertime, they're all going to be deep. Like, no, some bass are always going to be shallow. I mean, they all do their own kind of thing. So
I watched another one where it was, I don't remember if it was on Champlain or, but it was one of the New York lakes, and they done some smallmouth and largemouth and done it at a tournament site and this and that, and it went on for a period of a few years there, and they showed how many fish actually just went ahead and stayed right there. But the smallmouth were the big time ones that left quicker, went further, things like that. But that's pretty neat to know, and I'd like to see that happen just here out of curiosity,
Yeah.
Not that it'll solve anything, but.
yeah, and it's why we, with some of our fish care and tournaments and stuff, is we're not trying to drop all the fish at the dam access on Degray.
Yeah.
Right.
We know that largemouths aren't move real far right away, so to alleviate some of those stockpiling effects, we'll move them to another ramp and just spread them out. Just not have them all piled up.
That's what we do when y'all can't come, we carry them somewhere else. It may not be but 2 or 3 miles, but carry them somewhere else and give it a chance, cause.
Yeah, they do move slowly away. It takes them a little while, but it eliminates them from piling up just that one ramp.
Well, we're supposed to, this is a little off the subject, but I'm gonna bring it up since we actually talked about it a while ago. Sometime next week, we're gonna stock some more Floridas in Degray. And we got grass now, so what's gonna happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's no telling. When you think of what you need to grow a large fish, you need 4 things that come together. Okay, you have to have the right habitat. Okay, and fortunately, with us getting aquatic vegetation, we are moving towards what we would consider more ideal largemouth bass habitat. The second thing you need the forage base. Okay, which fortunately Degray's got and when I say forage, I'm not talking about just the amount of groceries that are out there. I'm also talking about the quality. We've got salad versus cheeseburgers, and luckily Degray does have quite a few cheeseburgers swimming around out there in terms of shad. Whenever we look at condition of fish on Degray, they are always in great shape, which means that they're not only getting enough food, but they're getting the right type of food. The third thing that you need longevity, right? You actually have to be able to live to an age to become a trophy fish, right? And the fourth thing that you need is the genetic potential. I'm naturally not a big person. I don't have the genetic potential to be a trophy-sized human being, right? So you have to have that genetic potential in there. So if you can tie those 4 elements together, you can have a really good fishery. Now, it's also important for us to manage our expectations. Do we expect this to be, one of the best fisheries on the face of the planet? I don't know if we'll ever reach that, but in terms of really moving that size structure to where there's a noticeable change in the average weight of fish being weighed in and the number of these 8+ pound fish that are being produced, I do think that there's potential that we could see those increases.
All right, well guys, we're gonna take a break and we'll come back in just a few minutes and talk about some fish care.
This episode of the Keep Arkansas Fishing podcast is brought to you by Garmin. Garmin provides the most unique and innovative fishing sonar on the water. To learn more, visit Garmin.com or search Garmin Fish Hunt on all your social media platforms.
All right, guys, we're back from a little break, and we'll talk a little bit now, and Jeff's going to enlighten us on some summer fish care. So I hope he substantiates some of my thoughts here, and I ain't been doing it all wrong all these years, but we'll find out. Talk to us, Jeff.
Yeah, as you know, summertime, I mean, it's brutal on us humans. You can imagine how the fish probably feel when they're cooped up in a live well. So there's been a substantial amount of research that goes into looking at tournament mortality, and it all pretty much concludes the same thing, that summertime tournaments that's when you're going to have your highest mortality of the year. But yeah, there are steps to take that hopefully will reduce that mortality. I guess I'll just get right into them. We have these cards that we give out to people. On our bass identification card on the back, it has all these great tips for keeping fish alive. So, it's just a nice little handy card to keep in your boat. It's waterproof. You don't have to even remember, like, what do I need to do? Like, you could just grab one of these cards and you got it right there. Take it out before the tournament and see what you all need to keep your fish alive. The biggest thing you can do when that water gets over 80 degrees, that's kind of that tipping point. Up to 80 degrees, in the 70s, you're going to be okay. It's starting to get warm, but once you hit 80 degrees, that tournament mortality, the summer mortality, that's when it's going to really start to increase. So have ice with you when you're out there. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. If you can add about 5 to 8 pounds of ice, once that, you want to try to keep that live well temp around 75 to 80 if you can. If you can have a thermometer in your live well, that's awesome. You can really keep track of it then. But yeah, just adding ice, that's going to really help. Keep it recirculating. That's going to keep the oxygen flowing in there. A good tip that I've kind of heard is have a product like Rejuvenate or G-Juice or something like that. And when you add that in there, you can kind of keep that and use that as an indicator. Is when that stuff gets recirculated out, that's time to get fresh water in there, some more Rejuvenate or G-Juice or whatever you want to use, and more ice in there. And that'll give your fish the best chance they have. If you don't have stuff like that, just using something plain like non-ionized salt, a third cup for every 5 gallons that you have in your live well will go a long ways. That helps protect their slime coat, helps them kind of with oxygen uptake. It's just another great thing that you can do. Fish fizzing is another thing that I'm always kind of harping on people to try doing. I know some people aren't comfortable with it. It's a very easy thing to do. Again, we have placards that people can get from us that just gives you a step-by-step. There's a ton of Google or YouTube videos out there that you can go and just see how it's done. I prefer to go through the side. I know some people would go through the mouth, and the research has shown that going through the side is the better method, but if people are comfortable going through the throat with it, I say do it if you're comfortable with that. Like, I'd rather see people do it and give the fish a chance rather than just letting them sit there and struggle. All it takes is a needle that I get from a farm store. It's a 16 gauge 1.5 needle. It gets stuck in the side, and fizz, kind of hard to tell you the whole thing without actually showing it, but like I said, YouTube has a ton of videos on how to do it. Just watch some of those, and that's for wintertime tournaments as well. Anytime you're fishing deep and those fish come up, and a lot of times you can even see the little bubble that forms on the side of the fish, like it's basically telling you where you need to put that needle. So those are a few steps on keeping fish alive during the summertime. I do get questions about the flip weights, the thin weights. I personally don't really recommend those. That will help a fish right itself, and it'll help keep it from struggling in the live well, so it's not expending as much energy. But the problem is still there. It's still experiencing barotrauma. It has that pressure built up, so it still needs to have that alleviated. It will, right that fish and keep it from struggling. So maybe you can get it to someone that's more comfortable with fizzing it faster, but I would rather just see someone fizz it rather than do the flip weights. The flip weights aren't going to alleviate the problem.
I've never tried those, so I don't even have a comment there. So I've wondered what real thoughts were.
Yeah, and I've talked to a few people nationwide on their thoughts on them. Gene Gilliland, the BASS conservation director, he doesn't really recommend them either, and he's kind of the king of keeping fish alive during tournaments. So now I've talked to him about it, and he didn't recommend them. So it just kind of I'm also don't recommend them.
The thing is that going back to the fizzing thing, I know a lot of people that's been fishing a long time that they just are literally scared to do it.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I'll hurry. I have them real often come to the weigh-in early because they're scared the fish isn't going to make it. Now, really, if they would just, maybe if you do lose a fish or two by doing it wrong, that's better than losing a lot of fish from now on. So take a shot.
Yeah, and I know it's scary to be sticking a needle in the side of a fish. You think you're putting a hole in it, but when you stick that needle into the fish and you pull it out, it's kind of like a wine cork or something like that. That thing sucks back up again, and that hole isn't
Just
there.
like we did.
Yeah, so you're not really, unless you really miss something, you might hit an organ, but I show people and they're just always shocked on how easy it really is. So it's just a matter of doing it a couple times, getting comfortable, and I think they'd be amazed on how many fish are going to survive. Because I'm at some of these tournaments doing fish care, and I see some of these fish that I know would have made it had they not been struggling in the live well for 6 hours. If they had been fizzed right away, they would have had plenty of energy to right themselves, but they were exhausted to death at that point. So, and every fish we can save out there, like Sean said, longevity is a huge thing. It's one of the 4 pieces for producing a trophy fish. That fish needs to survive to get big enough to be a trophy.
Yeah, and it seems like in every tournament, the fish that are in the worst shape is your bigger fish.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially during the summertime, it's rough on them. That's a confined environment. The bigger the fish is, the more confined it is in there. Especially when you start putting 4 more fish in there with them. The bigger fish tend to not handle it as well. So, and if they need to be fizzed, that's going to give them their best chance. You just don't want them struggling in your live well all day.
And you're talking about the ice deal. I always found through trying numerous things, the easiest thing for me was to freeze 2-liter bottles of water, wrap them up good in some towels, stick them in a dry box. As soon as I get there, fill my live well up with water of a morning and drop one of them in, and then put one in every 2 or 2.5 hours after that, depending on how hot it was. And just like you said, whatever brand fish care product you want to use, I don't know that one's any better than another.
And the great thing with doing the soda bottle thing is it don't matter what kind of water you fill up in there. You put it in there, if it has chlorine in it or whatnot, it's sealed up.
That's what I always done.
There, so.
Some people say the chlorine doesn't matter, no matter, since you're not really getting that much of it in there, but I'm not a big fan of drinking the chlorine in water myself.
Yeah.
So it's just easier, and then I don't have especially nowadays, I think a bag of ice $2 or $3 now. You buy 4 or 5 bags of ice,
That adds up.
you've hit a lick now. So, and then buy the ice that you've got to have for yourself. It's it actually gets into a hard way to carry enough with you. So, but we made 4 2-liter bottles. I never had an issue, and it was easy. Get back home, rinse them off, throw them in the freezer again, and good to go.
And just, I don't know, I guess another thing that I see at some of these tournaments, you guys are always excellent about not letting this happen, is just you'll see the guys with their tournament bag and they'll go to take a picture of their fish and they put their bag on the ground, and it's hot pavement in the summertime. That ground's 125 degrees, maybe more. that's just cooking those fish in there. So you just don't want to have, you don't want to keep the fish out of the water as long as you can, or as a short amount of time as you can, and just don't let them really touch any exterior surfaces.
That's why we've always used as many tanks with as much aeration and fish care products in those tanks, and then the mesh bags. We've just found that helps so much, because some people are, I guess the nicest way to say it, they're a little lazy. They won't put an air stone over into their bag, but if they just set the bag in the tank, and then they're getting more oxygen that way too.
Yeah. No,
It's just, that seemed to work really good for us.
Yeah, it's a good system.
And now I see, like you're talking about, I see these bags sitting on the concrete or the asphalt a lot more regular than I would like to.
Yeah.
And
So just another thing to keep in mind, just when you're out there, and some people, I'm sure it's going to slip their mind, but hopefully it won't.
yeah, all of us get caught up in the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
Especially things going on, and you're always wanting to BS with your buddies and this and that, and you'll stand there with a bag longer than you really think you do sometimes. So, but there's not a lot of oxygen in a weigh-in bag. If you've got 5 decent fish in there, there's not really a whole lot of water in there.
No, they're gonna basically. You need to be quick with that bag. You can get as much water as you can try to carry in there, but if you got 5 good bass, they're probably going to run through that oxygen in a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. Especially when the water's warm, they're going to run through it even faster.
That was a deal that we started it simply because of COVID, there for a while, but doing the drive-through weigh-in, they could drive right up there to the stage and pull their fish out and drop them in the tanks, and they weren't out of the water a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, probably the best way to do it, but
when it's feasible, yeah. I know that's not always feasible, but
it takes a lot of room to do that, and most of our lakes don't have parking lots and stuff that's got that much room, but it's a good way to do it. I think it's the best way for the fish themselves. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, anybody got anything else? Forrest, you got anything you want to say? Tell us where we went wrong.
Sounded good to me.
Well, guys, we sure appreciate it. I appreciate y'all coming down. We've been trying to do this for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And seems like Forrest or it's never been y'all one. Either our one's always seems like running around like a chicken with her head cut off. So it's, but I enjoyed y'all coming and appreciate it. And maybe this grass and these fish we plant next week, next year we'll catch 5-pounders off of them.
Yeah, we hope so. Yeah, we would really appreciate you having us on, and we love getting down here and chatting with you and just talking about what's going on in area lakes and what we're seeing as biologists, what our anglers are seeing, and I think it's important that we maintain these open lines of communication. So we really appreciate you having us on here.
I know for a fact, which the fish care deal, all of us have issues, or some of us do at this time, but I know I've talked to a lot of people about the vegetation, and they don't know what's out there, don't understand what's been going on, and maybe this will clear there a little bit.
Yeah.
They'll understand more about it. So.
Yeah, we one thing that we're really pushing right now is trying to be better at communicating what we're actually doing, So I highly encourage anyone that's listening to this that doesn't follow our the AGFC Black Bass Management Facebook to tune into that. We try to really keep it up to date with a lot of what we're doing. Just like with the vegetation, over the last several years, Jeff and I have tried to make a lot of videos just talking about what we're doing, the different species that we're actually dealing with, and if nothing else, when the anglers are out there, they may identify a species that we're using, and that information is extremely helpful just in terms of where this vegetation is becoming established and where we can really focus our efforts moving forward.
The Facebook page is a great deal, and y'all know I harped on this for a long time, but I'm going to add another thing that's been really key to me, or it piques my interest, is what do you call it, the constant,
Constant contact?
yes.
Okay, yeah.
The direct email, that's, I'm crazy about that. I know practically everything that seems like that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if people are interested in signing up for the constant contact email, there is a link on our Black Bass Facebook page, a button to hit where it'll take them to a sign up page and they can get on that then.
Yeah, I actually seen yesterday, maybe that, one of the smaller lakes up wherever it's at, they were stocking it and whatnot. So, you get stuff that, I come back to this deal like I've harped to y'all for years, well, we don't know if you're doing anything or not.
Yeah.
Well, whenever you get that, you see, well, they're here and they're there and over here. So, I know then stuff's happening. It may not be happening around my house, but it's happening somewhere in the state. So
yeah, no, and we literally just had a management section staff meeting several hours ago, and this was one of the main topics. And constant contact came up. Our constant contact emails have kind of dropped down a little bit. It was just kind of hey guys, we need to get those emails fired back up. Try to just let people know what we're doing. And if we can, the why behind why we're doing what we're doing. And a lot of that stems from conversations with you. Talking about how you just genuinely didn't know what we're doing.
Right.
If we're not if we're not communicating with you in a way that then why would we ever expect you to know that we're stocking fish?
Well, I was always kind of lucky and kind of knew because I know so many of you personally.
Yeah.
And staying in contact, I kind of knew, but the general public didn't know.
Yeah.
And I know, but I can just flip this thing on in 2 minutes and I know what's going on pretty much across the state. So I'm tickled to death with it and thank everybody for doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily working with, the Game and Fish's communications folks like Forrest, they have just done a phenomenal job of putting together videos and a lot of different, trying to tap into a bunch of different ways of getting the word out of what we're actually doing. And I know that at least from the biologist standpoint, with the content that we're putting out, we've got a lot of room for improvement. We're not putting together content like our communications folks. They're a little bit different ballgame than we are, but we're trying to get better. We really are trying to get better with putting together videos and pictures and, not trying to write novels, trying to condense everything down to a couple sentences and get that out.
Well, too, like this year before last when we stopped Florida's in Degray, Forrest and I went and he filmed a lot while I was distributing fish out there and, we put that out and that. Then people, like I say, everybody knows what's going on and everybody can become a part if they're willing also.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's, because like I say, Brett and I have talked and he knows I'm always willing and we're going to stock them next week here in Degray if something doesn't happen. So, that's...
In reality, a lot of folks have a lot larger reach than we do. Like with the number of people that and the connections that they have. So, if you see a post that you find very interesting, if you could share that or let people know about it, it's, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing here. So as many people as we can get kind of helping us get the word out, that's just going to go that much farther,
Well, like I said, I appreciate y'all coming and we'll call this the end of an evening and we'll talk to y'all another day.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
See y'all.
Bye.